point is, were they correct? You know, which is what we're talking about. Anyway, to boil it down, and again, this is just my not total understanding of it, but
yeah.
I think that when they started, they were one thing, and when it came down to what they should have got out of it, it was a different thing. And the different thing was that it was then Frank's, and that he was treating them as sidemen, which they weren't.
That's right.
And then he went on to establish a way of working which was Frank with sidemen, which was fine, because if you
understand that.
Yeah, if you understand that from the start, yeah, great, okay, that's your job, you know. But if you're doing something else, and then the rules are changed, and now it's mine, and I give you, you know, what I want to give you, then that's not right, you know.
So you have a problem like that right now?
Well, it's a lot different, but I'll boil it down in fairly simple terms. At one point, in fact, it's kind of the opposite. At one point, I was an employee of Frank's company. I did a certain amount of work during that period, which was a short period, and so that work would legally be work for hire, which means that I was paid for it, and I have no right to any of it. You know, it belongs to whoever owns it now, which would be the Zappa Family Trust. But that was only a short period of time. After that period, the work that I did was on a freelance basis. It wasn't even done for the Zappas. It was done for Warner Brothers, and it was billed on a basis of specific use, and therefore, any other use of it would be something that I should be paid for.
And that it got used for other stuff?
Well, it got used for CD packaging.
Yeah.
That was not part of the original deal,
right,
so to speak. Again, it's very complicated. But
and you didn't get paid for that?
I didn't get paid for any use of it beyond the original use, which was something that I billed Warner Brothers for. Now, Gail has treated it as if it's all work for hire. And let's say the Zappa Family Trust has treated it as if it's all work for hire, and has printed on all of the new releases that they own it, and they put their copyright on the artwork itself.
Right.
Just for the first time. I mean, it was not copyrighted specifically before that. So she's making an assertion that she owns it when I don't believe she should. That's that's the problem I have. Let's say the problem, but that's the situation that exists between me and the Zappa Family Trust.
At this point?
At this point, right.
And you don't need to talk about it anymore, because that's...
Right, well, that pretty much explains it. You know, I mean, she's claiming ownership of all the artwork that I did for them, and on the basis that it was done as work for hire, which it wasn't. Only very small part of it was done work for hire.
Right.
And the law is fairly specific about that work for hire really only exists if you're an employee, or if you, through documents, transfer ownership, you know, through an agreement, which we never had. I simply did work. I billed Warner Brothers for the album covers for that job, and billed them accordingly. I mean, I billed them based on an album cover, not based on selling them, you know, perpetual rights to do whatever they want with the artwork.
Right. Now, you may not want to answer this question, and I respect that. Is Gail... Do you understand why Gail doesn't follow this? Do you
What do you mean?
Why do you think Gail is being mean on this point?
Well, I'm not saying she's being mean. I'm not actually characterizing her. In fact, I'm going to remove her from the equation.
Yeah.
Because what exists is a Zappa Family Trust, which is a company or an organization, let's say, a very wealthy organization. And I can only look at the way they operate as, a corporation.
Do you know why that corporation is being mean about this, or whatever the word would be?
Again, I don't want to put it into emotional terms, but I think that I think the main thing is that Gail probably never really realized.
Okay, let's just leave it at that.
You know, I mean, because I don't know that she may have at some point just decided to assert and see what happens. You know.
Right.
But I never really realized either, because it never really came up. I was kind of pissed off when the first releases came out and I wasn't consulted or anything, mainly because they were such a lousy job.
Yeah.
And then when I went to Rykodisc and I heard they were going to re-release it, I said, look, you got to redo these, right, And they agreed, and they permitted me to get involved, let's say. They hired me to be involved. But until that point, I never really looked at the legal situation regarding them. Because, first of all, I had a relationship with Frank that I didn't want to blow,
Yeah.
and with the company. And I thought that, if there was a way that we could maybe work together to do something with the art besides just album cover, that we would. But then Gail pretty much, or let's say the Zappa Family Trust, pretty much just took it on themselves to say they own it when they printed their copyright on the new releases.
Right.
So this is something that essentially just came up in the last year. So having done that, then I have to challenge them. And now, through my lawyer, that's what I'm doing, and I'm finding, I believe, that I'm in a good situation that I never realized I was in before.
So that's where it is now. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the chart here, because one could do a long, maybe we'll do this over time, go into the details, because you got here Mark Spitz.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that because the word of that star is similar to that? That's a pun on...
No, I think it's because the Olympics were just that year or something, and yeah, they would have been, right? What year was this, 70?
Well, this came out in 75. Did you do it in 74? And the Olympics would have been 72.
Well, maybe it was... I thought, the Olympics would have been 72 and 76. Well, maybe... Well, I guess it probably would have been the 72 Olympics
Yeah.
I was referring to. But for some reason, I guess he was still around as this, superstar swimmer. So he was just the first person that came to mind.
In the pun context?
Yeah, when I decided to make Aquarium a swimmer,
Okay, now that's your projection. Now you go up to the hose on the industrial vacuum cleaner and you got grunion.
Yeah.
Now, grunion runge, were you aware of those early...
Yeah.
Okay. Is that what that's referring to?
Yeah.
So now you're making a zap. Well, but it's based on the word.
Oh, no, well, I was also aware of the grunion as a fish because when I first came to California and lived on the beach in Venice, that's how we got our dinner some nights, was the grunion run.
Right. So the word of the original star, that's a pun, that's evoked by whatever word that star is.
Yeah, there was probably some sort of, I don't remember. Again, it would be interesting for me to go back and get a star chart and
retrieve.
Try and recreate the puns. That would be interesting. Yeah.
Or find out what your thought processes were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you got Big Swifty in here anywhere?
I don't think so.
All right, because you got Daryl Zanuck. But what did Frank? Did he discuss?
The reason Daryl Zanuck is in there is because all of these Arabic-sounding names. And there must have been a name, Dar Al something,
Right.
And so I came up with Dar Al Zanuck.
Right. So there are the originals. Some of them were Arabian.
Yeah, and like the Sal names and the Al names.
Right.
They're all like from Arabian names of stars.
Okay. Now, did Frank ever discuss Big Swifty with you, who was a big power in Hollywood?
I don't think so.
Okay.
What album is that from?
What's that, Jerry? Grand Wazoo?
Yeah.
Grand Wazoo.
Yeah, okay. Well, then I don't remember. I don't remember the reference without going back and hearing the song.
Right. Now, Sirius, over on the left, that is reference to SIRIUS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is Sirius? Now, that evokes a strange image in the Uncle Meat booklet is Roy with his hand up to his chin, and he's in a thoughtful, concerned facial posture, and he's like studying something that he doesn't find very humorous or he's puzzled by.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see the word serious, I think of the image of Roy. To me, as many years ago, being younger, I said, "Oh, that's Frank satirizing the parents not understanding, or somebody over-intellectualizing and philosophizing, or sociologizing about what was going on around him." It's an intellectual posture, the way Roy is in that image. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now that's something you selected.
Well, again, I wouldn't draw any conclusion from it other than that there was a star named Sirius, and that was a pun on the star's name. I don't think I took it past that.
You see, I think that you and Zappa acted out in your art what McLuhan said. And McLuhan said the best form of art in the late 60s, early 70s was collage. But not that the content at any point. The collage was a mirror of the fact that we lived in an environment where the content was obsolete and the form was what was conditioning people. Because we cannot project anything serious in these collages.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is in my interview with Frank years ago. He talks about the Pauline Oliveira concept, that he is presenting elements that are above human consciousness and below, and when they interact, they create a mass in the middle, which is what the human being experiences. But he's talking about the above and below consciousness thing, and it's like the undifferentiated tissue in the Grand Wazoo story is the experience humans feel in interacting with reality. But you and Frank are showing that reality as a collage, but the interesting point is the things above and below consciousness, which is the medium.
Well, that's right. Okay, sure.
So had you read McLuhan?
I'm sure I did, but again, when I did my art, I was doing art. I wasn't really thinking philosophically about it.
But you're acting out what he's saying. Well,
but perhaps that's because what he was saying had a certain truth to it, and so by acting out art, that would be a natural result.
Right. So it's like lumpy gravy. It doesn't hold together in terms of what it says, but there's lots of interesting experiences within it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people instinctively say, Ben, you can't analyze the content of Frank because the content is not what's going on here, going on with Frank. So
you analyze it.
You can analyze it, but in the end, it becomes your personal projection.
Yeah.
And it's something I could engage with, but the message is that for general use is the content's irrelevant. It's a game. It's playful.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
And part of the elements of
it's irrelevant, but I would say that you can't analyze it to the degree that most analysis does.
Right. It's much like the page of Finnegan's Wake. You can look at neat patterns in it, but you can't say overall what frame or meaning it's fitting into.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the frame or meaning it's fitting into is that the content's irrelevant, and it's your own projection, and therefore you would have to allow things to happen. But if you're
that's your projection.
Right. That's right. Because
I would say that would be true, but maybe not the only truth.
Right. So see, you and Frank as artists were dealing with the information overload environment of the 60s, which people imitated privately by taking drugs and privately blowing their minds by creating information overload for themselves.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in that sense, looking at the Seconds interview, how you guys are projecting the psychedelic thing, but the big question was, why were you guys not for drugs? You know what I mean? The general myth is that you and Frank, or at least Frank, was anti-drug.
Yeah.
But they're associated with a drug culture, the psychedelic counterculture.
I wasn't anti-drug.
No, you weren't. But the image of Frank is that he was anti-drug.
Well, I think Frank was anti-drug to some extent.
Right, but then you clarify your position in that interview.
I do?
Yeah, you say that I don't think drugs, I'm not against the insights drugs generate. You say, I think those insights can be done by other means than drugs.
Right.
You do acknowledge that, yes, you could get insights from drugs if it's handled properly.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time you're saying,
I think drugs are very, again, it's another subject that's like oversimplified.
Right. But it's the times. At the time, people were misusing the drugs.
Some weren't.
And some weren't.
Most were.
Most were, some weren't. So it's hard to have an opinion. But it seems that
one person can do the same thing as another person, and one's misusing it and one isn't.
Right. So isn't it strange?
People have different tolerances.
Right, but
no tolerance for drugs, so I couldn't use them.
Right. So the thing is that that many people thought that Frank was on drugs because he created the collage effect or simulated drug experience listening to his albums.
Well, I think that was just because, also because people just were it was, the first time that someone was doing anything that different.
That collage-y.
Just by being different, it was equated with drugs.
Right, but it was...
And I always thought, well, before I met Frank, I thought the same thing. I thought, man, this guy must be doing a lot of drugs. And that's why, when Esther first suggested I meet him and maybe work for him, I don't think so,
Right.
And then she told me, well, no, he doesn't do drugs. And I thought, what, really,
Yeah, because,
Probably made up his name after Zap Comics.
Right. Yeah, because the Help Him a Rock, or whatever it is, Kansas, the Freakout sections, the second sides of the second album, if you had taken drugs, he actually recreated acoustically different stages of the drug experience.
Yeah.
And in 200 Motels, visually, he shows certain paranoid states in the imagery. The video imagery really shows what one sees when one's paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
Like a shark. The yellow shark is coming out of this imagery. The yellow shark was coincidental later, but in 200 Motels there's a section where Jeff is freaking out, and it looks like he's starting to perceive a shark coming at him.
Yeah.
Which is a paranoid state you can hallucinate when you're on drugs.
Right.
So the interesting thing is that...
Also have that paranoid state without being on drugs.
Right. Now the interesting thing is that Frank, in the drug culture, could simulate the drug experience, so everybody thought, geez, this guy knows the drug experience and he's replaying it for me, he must have done drugs, he knows it.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing is that he could do it without doing drugs, even though he did take 10 joints once. He said in his youth he smoked marijuana about 10.
No, I don't believe that.
You don't believe that he did do joints 10 times?
I believe he did it 10 times, perhaps, but I think he did it a couple times maybe.
Yeah, and he says he fell asleep and he got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
But, so he had some insight on psychology or what happens to people in altered states.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's because he actually himself was a paranoid and he knew what emotional states one can go through when you're neurotic, or whatever you want to call the vulnerable state you're in when you experience that.
Perhaps, but I think it wouldn't necessarily be, that wouldn't be necessary. It could also be just simply being intelligent enough to
figure it out,
determine it, and, look at other observations about the states and about drugs, and, particularly because he was so cynical about it all.
Yeah.
And satirizing it. When you satirize something, you can intellectually, or let's say intelligently, determine what you're doing.
Yeah.
Without necessarily having experienced it.
But that's right. Now the thing is that he is presenting collage, and the collage experience of citizens in the 60s. Then they imitate it with the drugs, and then Frank mirrors it back with him with his stuff and your graphics.
Mm-hmm.
You can see why you're situated in a time. Your style fits a time.
I can. I always felt I was counter to the time.
Well, that's the point. Because you guys could show it up, you presented a mirror, then you're a counter to the time. But it's perceived as...
To me, the psychedelic look was so limited.
Right. You don't have a psychedelic look, but you have a psychedelic effect because of the collage element. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you had to be detached to create the effect.
Uh-huh.
So, you weren't part of it. But isn't it interesting that you guys get typecast in that as part of the symptoms?
I know.
Rather than doing what art does, is holding up a mirror.
Yeah.
And you guys presented a very accurate mirror
mm-hmm.
of what was going on.
Uh-huh.
And but it's a communication problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a dilemma of any artist who works in pop culture. It's consumed for different reasons.
Right.
And Frank was always wrestling with that. That's what Larry the Dwarf in 200 Motels discusses. Or Don Preston, if you put the sock over here on the left, it's commercial.
Right.
If you put the sock over here on the right, it is not commercial, it's avant-garde. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's really neat how Frank could act that out, or was aware of the dilemma of communicating in the TV culture.
Yeah.
And did you guys talk about that, or was it just instinctive for you two to be like that?
Yeah, it was instinctive.
Yeah, so what do you think in your personality made you anti that? Is this the genius part?
When you say anti-what?
Anti-drugs, See, you guys were outside of the situation, satirizing it, or commenting on it. You had to detect...
I would say that I was led that way by Frank to some extent, because
there's a key point.
Working for Frank.
Now that's a key point, right?
I was at home there because I was while not anti-drug, I couldn't use drugs. I mean, it just didn't agree with me.
Right, you tried it and it didn't work.
Well, I wouldn't say it didn't work. I was just too sensitive to them or allergic to them or something.
Right, so...
I mean, at least the main drugs that were of interest to people, particularly marijuana.
And if you weren't allergic, you might have done it more.
Probably, yeah.
Right, and so a person who by accident works with a guy who wants to be anti-drugs.
Well, I don't know that it's by accident.
Yeah, right. It may not be accident, but within normal human perception, he was lucky to find someone to do the kind of art that he needed.
Fortunate.
Fortunate to do the art he needed, and that person wasn't necessarily had the same attitude as Frank, but was useful to Frank and was influenced by Frank on that point.
Yeah, well, that's what I think. A lot of it was karma, you know.
Uh-oh, now we're getting metaphysical. which I can get into, but let's hear some theories. It's not embarrassing to talk about that for me. I mean, I'm the guy who interviewed the dead Frank, so... So what? Tell me about karma. Whatever personal level you want to talk about in relation to Frank.
Well, I don't know that I can, actually.
But it's an instinctive feeling that you feel...
Because, so many things did happen. First of all, the fact that I kept running into Frank before I actually even met him.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That lead me to believe... Of course, I believe in karma because I'm a Buddhist. I practice Buddhism, and it's to me, as logical a way of looking at reality as any other, So
right.
I think that it's a valid concept. Karma is simply causality, cause and effect on another level.
Well, just as an aside, I agree with you, but when I was first looking at Frank's early albums and pictures of you guys, I always had to make an extra effort to say, oh, that's Kelvin, and this is Frank. Sometimes I couldn't tell the difference.
Uh-huh.
Whatever image of shot photographs, I'd have to take a second look. So you guys were similar physically in my mind way back then.
Okay.
Your faces.
Uh-huh.
Did you ever have that problem, Jerry, when you first looked at these people?
No, but just looking at the
picture up there.
They have big noses.
Yeah. You look at the picture in Life magazine. I know the difference, but I know when I first looked, I had to really look, say which guy's Frank and which is Kelvin, or you know what I mean?
Oh.
So you guys were twins. You were Shem and Sean in a way.
Shem and Sean?
Yeah, from Finnegan's Wake.
Oh.
The twins. So anyways, so the karma, you became a Buddhist later?
Oh, yeah.
Right, so you're projecting your realization of Buddhism back on your relationship with Frank when you say it's karma. Now, what do you think is...
Well, I always kind of felt that there was such a thing as karma, but I never really understood it until I became a Buddhist.
So, what is...
Until I hate to even say I became a Buddhist, but let's just say until I started practicing Buddhism and then studying it and then having my own insights about it.
So what is
I always felt that there was such a thing. I just didn't really know what it meant.
Right, so you can't say what the karmic connection is between you and Frank.
No, and I don't think that's, there may be a possible way to do that, but that's not necessary,
Yeah, I could find out through the medium. I could talk to Frank because the medium does explain past lives and future lives, because the medium, the entities coming through the medium go into how all time exists. It agrees. Frank was right. If I'm talking to real spirit, or whatever that thing is that's coming through the medium, they're a group of entities called...
Ultimately, the spirit is the medium.
Right. And they say all time is happening all the time. It's all our lives are happening at the same time.
Well, yeah, but see, the problem is that when you use words have specific meanings, and when you use those words to mean other things, then they don't. When you say time has a specific meaning.
Yeah.
And when you say all things happen at all time, you're using a word that has a specific meaning to explain something that really can't be explained with words.
So you disagree with Frank making those statements, that he wasn't able to communicate that?
First of all, I'd have to look at the statement and analyze what I thought of the statement. But
right.
In general, to say, okay, all things are happening at all time, is to say, or all time is happening simultaneously, or something to that effect, is to put yourself outside of the scope of the word time, because time means...
Yeah,
I mean, there is no such thing as time. You have time-space.
Yeah.
There is the time-space continuum. And when you say time, you're really, the word is a metaphor for something that you can't actually single out as a separate thing.
Right.
Because there is no such thing as time.
Right.
You have time-space. And time-space is, everything. It's the eternity of all of reality, which is nothing more than the fusion of the subjective and the objective. So if you try to explain it with the separate part that isn't actually a part, it's maybe metaphorically you can get a glimpse of what that means, but that's not really what it is.
That's right. That's the mystery of perception or cognition.
Yeah.
Now that's the image, as you say this, that's what you're showing on the one-size-fits-all chart. You're showing implications of all time. You've got dinosaur, cars, people. It's all time, and it only can be a collage.
Yeah.
So even
I kind of like that idea of juxtaposing incongruous elements. I think that's, of course, that's what surrealism is to a large extent, isn't it?
Yes. But here's the thing, that you and Frank, if you give the surrealists and dadists credit in a certain way, that they did it and you guys replayed it, you just replayed it in a later time in a new cultural context, pop music. But if it's an eternal wisdom, then it's been redone. But that is what's similar. The way I think what you just said is in response to Frank's statement, but Frank was trying to say the same thing you just said.
Perhaps.
Because he said he disagreed with Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
He said that Einstein thought that space and time were interchangeable. Frank said, no, time is the sphere that space, as a Mobius strip, operates within. But that, in a way, is a bunch of gobbledygook, but he's trying to point out that what you guys think is time, if you use Einstein as a basis, is wrong. It's just a metaphor, and Einstein doesn't know what he's talking about, because you can't talk about it.
Right.
So in that sense, you and Frank are saying the same thing.
Perhaps.
Now, did you have that idea back then in '67? You were working with that concept?
Well, I might have actually, probably, and one of the reasons I didn't use drugs was because I had some drug experiences that were rather unpleasant. And again, I think because I was pretty sensitive to them, but some of these experiences, which later on, after I started practicing Buddhism and I really understood the nature of reality, I can go on to say that I did understand things that I was...
In retrospect?
In retrospect, yeah. So perhaps, that's where round things are boring comes from, too, actually.
Right. Yeah, that, you were saying that seriously in the piano, and you knew what you meant, and in retrospect, you're more articulate and understand it later through Buddhism.
Right.
Yeah. So, round things are boring. How does that relate to time? I mean, I guess I know what you mean, but let's just say what you thought you said when you said it.
Well, I'm not sure that I can really explain that.
We've just explained it.
I would have to say that it has something to do with, the continuous repeating of events.
Right. And that's time, as we think it is, or something.
Well, I think you could say that ultimately everything repeats itself.
Now,
but see, if you look at that from the standpoint of our perception of time, it's almost...
it doesn't.
Well, but if you look at it from our limited, very small perception of time, it's like looking at a picture of a star, or looking at a picture of a star map, or looking at the sky and looking at the stars and thinking that that's what a star is, or what a galaxy is, the picture that you have in your brain of what a galaxy is, and then suddenly realizing that, well, how huge it is,
Yeah, how puny your image is.
Yeah, how puny your image is compared to the reality of, the universe.
That's right.
The vastness of the universe is something that you can only really appreciate and kind of, you can grok it,
Yeah. Yeah, well, you realize you
perceive it.
You actually become aware of your brain as a faulty instrument because the way you think you use it and it gives you an image But if you step outside of that, you say, this brain ain't telling me nothing about what's going on.
Right.
Yeah. So
you can't actually step outside of it. You can
intuit being outside of it. Well, that's another paradox. You can't get out of it, but you do. You just expressed an awareness of the inadequacy.
Yeah.
You do have that experience.
But ultimately, we can only experience it through our experience anyway, because that's all that there is experience.
Yeah, now you get into the paradox of consciousness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So when you say round things are boring, boring implies negative, so what is the complaint? You know, is round, you know what I mean?
Well, I think at the time, again, it was based on a perhaps faulty but limited view of that experience of experiencing this kind of echoing of continual repeating existence, you know?
Yeah, visually and sound-wise echoing.
Yeah.
So when you got in the piano, Frank.
You know, it just came to mind is really what it boils down to.
Right, in the piano.
Spontaneous thing that I said.
But here's the thing, is that you were put in the piano and encouraged to talk.
Yeah.
Did you think it...
Out of my subconscious.
Right, but did you think, okay, we're going to have a serious discussion, or was the absurdity always there, which freed up your mind to be a little sillier?
Well, I think I probably couldn't think of anything to say, so I had to rely on my subconscious.
Right, and in the interaction that...
Really aware, I mean, because I'm a very self-conscious person.
Yeah.
I'm extremely self-conscious, and especially more so in the past, you know, when I was younger.
And Frank people used to say that he was very self-conscious.
Well, perhaps, but he was also I would say, much more secure in his persona, you know.
Right, in other words, he could go on stage if he had to, whereas you were always behind the scenes because you wouldn't go on stage.
Right, because I was very insecure in that sense.
Right, yeah. So the thing is, did Frank hand out any scripts for the conversations in the piano?
No.
No scripts?
There have been times when he might have influenced the direction of the discussion.
Well, there are tapes, you know, where he comes in, say something about this, or he did interject, but that was just his input.
Yeah.
But you people would then follow it because he was the leader, so to speak.
Yeah.
It would give you a clue.
Right.
So he did write it on a larger frame level.
Yeah.
The suggestive, he was the central scrutinizer, you know, seducing his advertising metaphor, seducing the situation a little bit in a certain direction.
Right. Right.
But he did. There's the control freak. But he allowed you guys to say anything you want.
Yeah.
So it's a.
Well, I think that that's kind of normal anyway, because I mean, unless let's say you put a bunch of people in a room and say everything you want. Well, if it goes well, then you don't need to exercise any control. If it gets either going in the wrong direction based on what you want to do, or if there's maybe nothing really happening, then you interject.
You interpret, and that's not a control freak. That's just aesthetic judgment. It's proper to do that.
It's creating his art, so that's. I never really thought. I mean, I wouldn't put Frank in just that control freak.
No.
Capacity myself, anyway. I mean, he certainly had that capacity, but it wasn't just that. And in fact, he goofed on it a lot himself, you know, obviously.
Yeah, so that when you heard Lumpy Gravy the first time, the tape, whatever point that you got the tape and heard the album, either when it came out or whenever.
Well, I was actually there when he was editing it.
Okay, but then you were there part of the process. Then when you go, whenever, 2 weeks later, 2 years later, you sit down and listen to it, did you have any surprises or insights about what Frank created from the chaos, the anarchy, how he created order out of it? Or was there order for you out of it?
You know, I don't think I really analyzed it that much because I was a part of it and I just enjoyed it, you know.
But he picked you. Isn't Round Things, does that begin the album or does it end the album again?
On the album.
Beg pardon?
That's the last thing on the album.
Right, so you listened to it. You did not know he was going to...
Last thing on the side one? I'm not sure now.
Anyways, it is an end point.
Maybe before the last musical piece, I don't know.
Right, but it stands out.
Yeah.
Now, you were there with all these other people who were saying things. You did not know that statement would end up standing out on the album. You know what I mean? You did not
Right.
anticipate.
Oh, I guess you could say that, but you know, when I said it, it just seemed somehow to resonate.
You knew you had wrapped it up.
Well, I knew that I had said something that was somehow important.
Oh, okay, so then when you hear the album, I mean, did you know during the making of it that he was going to feature it at that point? You know, at the...
Not really. I mean...
Right, so you don't know it till you hear the album, right?
Right.
And then you're gonna say, well, Frank's pretty smart. He knew I said something profound, and he puts it there at the right place.
Sure.
So then you have to be impressed with Frank organizing the chaos.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was your experience with Lumpy Gravy. You were impressed with the way he organized it.
Oh, yeah.
Even though for most people it wasn't organized. It's just the chaos stuff, you know. I would listen to it and think about different parts, like Motorhead and this and that. You could think about parts of it and find order in what Frank was pointing out.
You know, I think, again, being an artist, I perhaps appreciated its organization as an art statement, too, more.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it's really well organized artistically, and that perhaps is the first the first criteria that I tested, that I put it to the test. In fact, I was listening to a lot of music concrete even before I met Frank, you know, so I was into that kind of work. So it didn't strike me as being odd, you know.
Right. On the content level, you know, you understood what he was working with.
Yeah. So, I mean, I appreciate its artistic merit right from the start, I think.
And then, but are you saying, what is the test there? You were testing your future interaction with Frank based on what he came up with?
What test?
Okay, you said that was the test. What was the test?
I said that was a test?
Didn't he, Jerry?
Missed it.
Oh, I'm hallucinating here. I think, okay, you were impressed with the album.
Mm-hmm.
You knew what he was working with. Were you super impressed with what he did?
Well, I really liked it. Yeah, I really liked it. So if that's what you mean by impressed with.
Right, well, okay. You look at it another way. Here's the synchronicity. You've got the sphere, you got the outer region of the sphere, and you've got round things are boring. And I'm sure when Frank disagreed with Einstein, that was a quote I understand came up many years later. You're actually showing Frank's reality. You've got the outer sphere, which is time, and if round things are boring refers to time in your mind, all right? Then the content is this Mobius strip of forms inside, flipping into, or merging and...
Yeah, but, you know, that's a pretty easy conclusion to come to when you have something that's round and has stuff inside of it.
Yeah, but that's exactly...
Yeah, I mean, the basic structure of the star chart came from the star chart they have in National Geographic.
Right, but no, but Zappa says that his image of time is a sphere, and inside it is the Mobius strip of space.
Mm-hmm.
You have shown this.
Well, but that's your interpretation.
Right.
I mean, you're saying that I've shown that to you. I mean, that was
right.
My intention of showing Frank's interpretation of time with this piece.
Well, if you agree that okay, it is my interpretation, and we agree on some kind of level. It's funny that you showed his idea, you know, before he said it, but he probably had it. There's where you are the karmic twins. So you were the right artist to do. You're the right artist to do this, and you put round things are boring right in the right spot.
Yeah.
And you're now admitting that actually was the deep statement that you were working with in dealing with time, at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's see, if karma is underlying order, you know what I mean? It's synchrony with order in it. Order in the sense, now every word we say does not say what we're trying to say, right? Because words can't say it.
Right. All words are metaphors, and you can't. Yep. I mean, that's all they are.
Right. So there's a line from T.S. Eliot. The character says, "I got to use words when I talk to you." So you've got you're not involved with words without an awareness of their metaphor. Frank's not involved with words without an awareness of their metaphor. In other words, you're both aware of the awareness of verbal communication, and then he expresses that musically, and you express it graphically.
Yeah.
So why would he have the cover of Just Another Band from L.A.? Was that done by you?
Yeah.
Okay, now you got Cal on the license plate at the front of the car.
Uh-huh.
So that could be California, right?
Right.
But it's also you.
Right.
Is that a little joke?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that supposed to be your signature there? No, I guess you sign it somewhere else. Or you just give.
I don't have it in front of me, so I don't.
Okay, the picture on Inside, just another band from L.A. The workroom, where is that place at that time? Where was that?
Where you came to visit me up in Upperton.
That's what I always felt. You just
Yeah.
confirmed it. Matter of fact...
But it was put together just for that photograph because I didn't really have a working space that was quite like that.
You did it?
Yeah, I just fabricated it for that photograph.
Oh, it says fraudulently reenacted situation.
Right.
With one of those little take-you... Now, I always wondered where that was, and it was at that place, but I wouldn't have seen that.
No.
Where was it in the bed?
Not organized in that house.
That's right. Was it where you had the speakers and I listened to 200 Motels, or was it in another?
It was actually in the back bedroom. Because
where I saw you with the French woman, if she was French.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like the back room.
Yeah.
So, what were you communicating there? That you're overworked?
Yes.
And you're not getting paid and all that?
Right.
Is it after you had got pissed off and fallen away from Frank, and then came back?
Yeah, this was after coming back.
Right. So you're actually commenting on your Frank relationship here.
Yeah.
That you were forced to come back for whatever reason, and you needed money, and you had to work under...
I wasn't making that strong a comment on that. I mean, I'm joking when I say that because what I really was just, I was working hard on stuff, and I was tired, and thought, well, this would be a funny thing, I'll just put my head down and take it. But I took a bunch of other pictures, and that was the one that looked the best, But the reason, really, to reenact the whole thing was simply because I didn't have a studio, per se. I was, and
Yep.
never had one, actually.
Right.
In a complete form. And so the only way to really do it was to create a little, fake one.
Right. Now,
I wanted to show that there was like a storyboard for this Billy the Mountain story because Frank wanted to do that at the time. But that's all the further it got.
that's right. But if someone knows your biography, as you're spelling out in this interview, then you can see that within your own mind, it's a comment on working with Frank in particular,
Yeah.
which came out of a grievance you had earlier.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't make that much of a big deal out of the grievance part of it because if I was that aggrieved by it, I wouldn't have been working for him.
Right. And you wouldn't have come back.
Right.
And
when I did come back, things were different. Because I was then independent.
With
when I left, it was because I was leaving employ.
Right, and you came back under Warner's.
I came back as an independent. All the work I did after that was freelance. So I was independent. I could take a job or not, The fact is I probably took every job that Frank gave me. But I was independent. I wasn't an employee, and I worked then under my own terms. Of course, there were always usually rush deadlines, so you still had to work overtime. But on the other hand, I was setting the rules myself, basically.
Right. What was the?
Well, see, the other thing was that I wasn't working for Frank. I was working for Bazaar, and I would get direction from Frank about projects. I would go and talk to Frank about things he wanted me to do, and then I would have to deal with Herbie about money, and I would have to go talk to Herbie if I wanted more money. I would have to go talk to Herbie to say, Frank wants me to do this.
Right.
I need some money to do it, and Herbie would say, no, you can't do that. Frank would say, I want to do this I want you to build this model of a set for a movie we're going to do, and then I would go get money from Herbie, and he would say, no, we're not going to do that movie.
And then you have to go and tell Frank that you couldn't do it?
Well, then, I was always caught in the middle.
Yeah.
But the point was, I was just an employee, and I didn't want to be an employee. I wanted to be independent. So I decided it was just time to assert myself and said I'm quitting.
And when was that, 69?
I think so, but without looking at a calendar and figuring it out.
Right. Is it before the band breaks up? Before he disbands the Mothers?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not sure when that officially happened, but
It happened in August. August 69, September. It was
I think it would have been before because it was right after I finished Uncle Meade,
Right.
Right after that whole, and I think the band didn't actually break up until Burnt Weeny Sandwich, right?
No. He's in Time magazine, October 31st, '69.
Saying the band is broken up.
Yeah, it's about.
But did they actually break up then?
Oh yeah, they broke up. They broke up. It's in Rolling Stone in August '69, September. All right, we have the article. So
and it's got to be true if it was in Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
Right. No, the date. He talks about what he's going to do now. He broke up the mothers, and he talks about his own biography. That's when he saw Duke Ellington at some jazz festival that they were playing at, and saw Duke Ellington begging for money. And backstage, he goes, "My God, this guy is the king of American music, and he's got no money."
And if it's in Frank's book, it's got to be true.
Right.
Right? No, the point is, it's in the summer.
Ellington had no money.
Yeah, Ellington had no money, and he saw that, and it shocked him, and he really evaluated.
True?
Beg your pardon?
Is that true?
Oh, the point is not whether it's true, is that these festivals happen in the summer. I think it was even the Newport Jazz Festival, though I'm not. No, it wasn't the Newport Jazz Festival.
You know what, though? But I think maybe what happened was the band broke up, but then he hired sidemen after that.
Oh yeah, that's when you get hot rats.
Right. So to me, I didn't really think of it. I mean, because he was hiring the same people back again, the same way that then I became independent.
Right.
At the same time, pretty much. But I just started working for him again. But just the terms were different,
Okay, then you think you quit after Uncle Meat?
Well, again, I couldn't tell you the exact time without looking at
the calendar, right?
The calendar.
So we're talking.
We're talking about within that period.
Well, we know in that period is when Beefheart is living with Frank. Were you around at the house when Beefheart and the GTOs were staying at Frank's in summer and fall of '69, or the summer of '69? Were you part of that scene?
They were staying up on Woodrow Wilson?
Yeah. That's reported by Miles, who was there living with Frank for a while, interviewing him.
I certainly was around. Yeah, I certainly was around, but I don't remember ever thinking of them as living there. Now, Janet, I think that Christine was probably still the governess for a while.
Right.
Pamela was certainly around. She was living in that back cabin. I visited her there quite a bit.
And then she becomes the governess after.
Yeah, and then Janet took over, I guess, after that. Or no, was Pamela after Janet?
I think, well, we have in Wally's tape, August 71, Pamela comes in. So that's in August 71. That's after 200 Motels. Pamela is the governess.
I think that Janet must have been after that.
Or before, because she was taken over to London, which is in early 71, for 200 Motels.
Okay, maybe. Maybe it was before. Well, at any rate, the three of them were always around until Christine left.
Right.
Back to San Pedro.
And Christine's the one on the cover of Hot Rats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, saying that they lived there, I think, was probably an assumption on Miles' part, because I think that they just lived wherever they happened to crash,
Right. Do you know how to get a hold of...
And Pamela and Christine and Janet.
Right. Do you know how to get a hold of Motorhead?
Yeah.
Okay, someday we might want to interview him. Did you like Motorhead?
Oh, yeah.
What, is he the guy dancing in the beginning of 200 Motels, or is that Jimmy Carl Black? The opening.
I don't remember.
Jerry says Jimmy Carl Black, but it sort of looks like
Motorhead played the guy, the newt farmer.
Yeah, that's right. That's later. But there's this home footage.
No, that's
the home footage. That's in 200 Motels.
The very beginning is somebody dancing like in a little bedroom.
Definitely Jimmy Carl.
Oh, Jerry says Jimmy Carl Black.
You mean strapping like?
No, it's home footage, isn't it, Jerry?
Yeah.
It's a home footage stuff done somewhere.
In a hotel.
In a hotel room.
Yeah, that's Jimmy Carl Black, and doesn't he strap somebody on or something with the belt?
That's an Uncle Meat.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm confusing the two images.
But you would agree that it's Jimmy Carl Black, or you don't know?
Well, I can't picture the image from 200 Motels now that you're mentioning it.
Okay, but Motorhead. Okay, anyways, we can get in touch with Motorhead.
Yeah.
Now, you've got here Doll Foot as Young Rifle showing Mew Mason Voluptuizer.
Yeah.
Which is a quote from the Uncle Meat booklet, and this is on the Grand Wazoo.
Yeah.
Why are you you wrote Mew Mason there?
What?
Did you write Mew Mason?
Yeah.
That is your concept?
No, that was Frank's.
Ah, because that is such an important concept.
Yeah.
Because he has in Civilization Phase 3, where he says, Mew Masons with halos on them.
Okay.
He said, so this is can you remember why he told you to do that? I mean, that was a particle just discovered, I think, in the 60s.
Well, I think that again goes back even earlier to, how it connects to. All right, I'm not sure. If that was something that came up with the Doll's Foot and with the goofing on stage with everybody
At Garrick Theater.
Yeah, or if it was something that Frank attributed to the Doll's Foot rifle after the fact, when he had the first time I remember actually doing something was when I did the drawing that went in the Uncle Meat booklet, because he also it also relates to that picture of Pauline with the vibrator.
Yes.
Massaging. What does that say? Do you have the book there?
No.
We don't have the booklet. We got the album cover, but it's something like.
But do you remember? There's something where.
She says this fast and bulbous or the torchum something. You remember, Jerry? It's fast.
We'll get it in a second.
Oh, Jerry's going to get it in a second. But I know. How do you relate fast and bulbous and tight?
This is a Mu Mason voluptualizer.
It says Dollfoot as young rifle showing Mu Mason voluptualizer.
Yeah. Well, then isn't the
then there's a picture
vibrator that Pauline is using called the Mu Mason voluptualizer?
It may be. It looks like that's what she's using it. But
Yeah.
Jerry's getting the booklet.
Well, anyway, that's the first that I remember hearing Mu Mason. But then again, I might have heard it earlier. But I first of all, I'm not. I couldn't say one way or the other who came up with the concept, whether Frank did or whether someone else did, because there are a lot of concepts that are attributed to Frank that happened in collaboration with other people,
Right.
with the band members mostly.
So that whole section of the rifle, that is following his instructions specifically?
You mean the
drawing.
the drawing of the rifle?
Yeah.
Yes.
That he said this is what it looks like, draw it.
No, he said I want a drawing of.
A Dollfoot.
I want a drawing of the rifle with the Doll's Foot.
Showing Mu Mason voluptualizer. But
Yeah.
what is a Mu Mason voluptualizer?
It's the thing that Pauline is using on her. The whole point, I think, is that it wasn't that specifically designed. It was a goof Frank came up with, did it, and then I might have added something by drawing it. He might have then said, well, we've got these pictures of Pauline with the vibrator. That's the Mu Mason voluptualizer,
Oh, I see. We have the
The
booklet.
point I want to make is that everything was not planned out in such fine detail. We want this and this and this, like a Hitchcock play or a Hitchcock film where every scene is drawn out beforehand,
Yeah.
He would come up with a concept, and then a lot of times there would be interplay. Maybe he didn't come up with the concept. Maybe one of the other band members did, and then he took it and turned it into something else,
Right, because she's saying Zorch stroking fast and bulbous.
Okay,
Now, fast and bulbous, he acknowledges, comes from Beefheart.
right.
And that's not that's not Phyllis, that's Pauline,
Pauline, yeah,
the secretary
yeah,
from England.
right.
Right. Now if we take the words showing a Mu Mason voluptualizer. Now nobody knows, just looking at that, what a Mu Mason voluptualizer is. But you're saying that in the course of of illustrating it, Frank says imitate what Pauline is holding in her hand.
Perhaps. Maybe that's just a connection that I made on my own. But that was the voluptualizer.
Right. Oh, that may be your word, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. But the Mu Mason, was a concept that you never said that Frank brought in from somewhere.
Right.
Right.
I believe, although I knew about Mu Masons too, of course.
Right, because when I got this album in '69, I'm looking at this and I'm reading Dollfoot as young rifle showing Mu Mason voluptualizer, and so I go, well, that's just a stupid string of words. One part of your mind would go, it's a bunch of stupid words, doesn't mean anything, and why should it? It's not telling me anything. It's just silly surrealism. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Then you would then read, if you stuck with Frank, you'd see other albums would come out. And other things would happen, then you'd see a theme show up again, Mu Mason.
Right.
And then you'd say, oh, okay, let's go back and maybe there's a meaning here.
Yeah.
And you'd work through all his albums or through time 25 years, and you start seeing motifs. And the Fido dog motif became a popular one.
Yeah.
But I've noticed the Mason thing.
Yeah, well, I think that that's true, but I think it's also wrong to assert that there's this complex and very elaborate, very specific plan behind everything. I think that Frank reused a lot of secret clues, you know.
He what?
Myself. I think that Frank reused a lot of secret clues, you know. He revisited and reused concepts a lot, but that's, you know, I think he did it for the fun of it.
It's a game. Okay, it's a game.
But I think that you know, you can certainly draw a lot of these connections.
Well, I think in the end there is a framework that he's working from.
Well, I'm not saying there's no framework. I'm saying that every little connected thing is not a totally pre-planned. I mean, it's almost like one thinks that Frank came up with this idea at the beginning, had it all in his head, and then went and took and elaborately had it all planned out right from the very beginning, and then put everything together based on that plan.
Right.
And I don't think that that's true.
That was the first question I asked him when I met him in 1970.
Yeah, what did he say?
He said, no, it wasn't all planned out.
Yeah. So the point is, I mean, it's really easy once you start doing something and you come up with funny concepts and they work, to continue them, you know, and then create something more with it.
Yeah, and create the illusion as data comes in that there was a plan.
You know, well, I think that's also part of what he was doing. In fact, he said that he did have this plan, you know.
Yeah, then when
conceptual continuity.
Hey, snazzy executives. Now, my personal megalomania was when I asked him that question in March 70, and then when I later saw the snazzy executives, I said, Frank knew that some of his fans, indicated by me as a focus group, so to speak.
Yeah.
He says, ooh, they're onto it. I now have the clue to develop it.
Right.
And pretend it is there.
But I think, again, that was just part of his...
the game.
His game, yeah.
The game. But he did it very well, and as time, there was.
And he was also making a cynical comment about people who look for hidden meanings.
Right. But he also would tease them by saying there was hidden meanings.
Yeah.
And there is a continuity, like the dwarf thing, but we won't go back and go into that.
Right. But it certainly was. But I think the continuity is not in the specific threads so much as the general continuity. And one of the things that he was saying in terms of what conceptual continuity is that everything is part of it. It's not just the music, you know.
Right.
The art is part of it. And
it's theater.
It's part of it. The theater is part of it, and that's the idea behind conceptual continuity. And I think that he himself broke the thread with apostrophe.
Right. Were we talking about that last week?
I don't think so, but I remember now.
Why do you say he broke the thread there?
Well, from my standpoint,
yeah.
You know, because prior to that, all of the packaging did have a connection to the music.
Right.
You know, of course he went back again because obviously we did packages after it that were related in that sense. But apostrophe, I think, was the first one that didn't since I came along.
Right.
You know, that was just a picture of Frank, you know.
But that would be, if you see how the dwarf goes through all his work, I didn't get to tell you that did I tell you about the Struwwel Peter that he wanted the Ensemble Modern to find in Germany, in Frankfurt in '92?
No.
That's a dwarf thing from German culture. And he specifically told Van Carlson that once he found out about the thing, to go to the museum and film the German folk cultural artifact of the Struwwel Peter, who was this little dwarf girl, kind of a monstrous little weird girl, who would harass the villagers like a Rumpelstiltskin, but at the same time, when she went home, was tortured by her mother. And it's really a crystal image that comes up at the end of his career that goes back and ties the threads together. Because the torture never stops. If you think that all this music is done by Rumpelstiltskin, the ritual dance of the child killer, then you see Rumpelstiltskin goes out and be aggressive, but then comes home and gets beat up by the mother. You know?
Well, you kind of lost me with that, but...
Okay, so it's an interesting pattern. So let's go into...
a lot of other patterns that you could also fit it in.
Right. So when you have... what are the 5... Is this what this says, Jerry? What are the 5 clues on Just Another Band from L.A., if you know what they are?
I'll have to get one and look at it. You want to hold on a minute?
Yeah, we'll wait.
Okay.
He doesn't know.
I got to go pee again, too, so you got to wait about 2 minutes.
Okay.
You can pee in 2 minutes. I'm going to stop this because we're running.
Album. The little words. See, let's go what the statement is.
Oh, it just says, any visual similarity between the cover of this album, just another band from L.A., and the Uncle Meat illustrated booklet, not to mention Ruben and the Jets, is thoroughly intentional and contains 4 secret clues.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the snat is on Band and on Ruben, and the Chevy...
Looking at.
Huh?
Are you looking at the album or the CD?
The albums.
That's funny. I'm looking at one here, and it only says contains 4 secret clues.
Not the sentence before that?
No.
And that's the CD.
No, this is an album slick. It's an old one, though, for some reason.
It doesn't have the full sentence.
In the bottom corner?
Yeah.
Bottom right corner?
Does it say on top of that contains 4 secret clues, or is the whole sentence there in one piece?
No, the whole sentence says any visual similarity between the cover of Uncle Meat and Ruben and the Jets is thoroughly intentional and contains 4 secret
This
clues.
is an earlier proof that I'm looking at that,
Yeah.
that has a different...
So anyways, we've already done this, Calvin. We couldn't figure them out. One is the word snat,
Yeah.
which is on Ruben and Band. One is the Chevy 39, which is on Band and Uncle Meat
Yeah.
booklet. And then if you wanted, we always thought maybe it's the nose on Frank on Band and the nose on Frank on Ruben are dog noses.
Yeah.
And then it's endless from there. You can just speculate.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find the 4th one.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't remember either.
We already did this.
Well, it's a burger. But, you know, for me, I read you that the thing in Time magazine about the concentration camp, and the people have the crime carved in the name of their back, and they have lectures on American verities on the American hamburger. Now, the car sitting on American hamburger,
Right.
it really, Band really relates to the Ruben the Jets and the story and Uncle Meat. You know, these are aspects. But that doesn't come out in Uncle Meat, the album, but it comes out in the Time magazine, where he's talking about a film called Captain Beefheart and the Grunt People, which implies that's a film 5 years before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he redoes it with Jim Morrison and Grace Slick. That was the plan. So that's why he's saying Captain Beefheart and the Grunt People as a project in 1969. And I remember he was going to have Jim Morrison and Grace Slick. So but he is describing it in Time magazine, the Captain Beefheart film, in terms of Uncle Meat, already on the booklet. You know what I mean? Which is earlier in the year where they're in the concentration. The booklet is a boat on the edge of Grand Canyon.
But
The story is.
Yeah, the story is about the Grand Canyon reference is in the Uncle Meat booklet.
Right.
But that's the Uncle Meat film. Now we're doing Captain Beefheart in late '69, but it has elements from the Uncle Meat film.
Well, and it's all mixed together.
That's right. It's all one album. The whole 60 albums is one album.
Yeah.
Right? So it's interesting. It's like he really, to me, is imitating how humans look at the universe, because we see order in it, but we also see chaos.
Yeah.
And we say, who the hell put the order part in there, and what is the chaos part, right?
Well, we put the order in. We also put the chaos in.
Right, but there's
It's just your viewpoint of what exists.
well, the sun, I never bring the sun up every day. Someone else is bringing the sun up every day.
Why?
Yeah, why?
I mean, why?
Well, how do you
say
know?
that?
I don't want to go into that right now, Calvin. That's top secret.
But the reason I brought this up, Bob...
No, I want to deal with this issue.
Okay.
So this is the core. And so Frank creates a 60-album project that the user, the consumer of it goes, geez, there's some interesting themes at the beginning that show up at the end. So it implies order and pre-planning. You know what I mean? And then you say, nah, there's lots of crazy things that have nothing to do with the conceptuality, the surrealistic input of whatever is in particular songs. Like
Well, all I'm saying is that it wasn't all pre-planned from the beginning. That
Not
it
all.
Continue a cohesive, you know.
He created a world which imitates our actual experience in a world, in nature and technology, because we see glimpses of order and we see glimpses of chaos.
Yeah.
Frank creates a world after 60 albums that you see glimpses of pre-planned conceptual continuity or order, and you see also non-order. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's both half controlling and half allowing
Why
things.
does order have to be pre-planned conceptual continuity?
No, you see order, but then you then speculate. Is that pre-planned or not? But the point is you see repeating elements.
Yeah, but does that mean it's pre-planned because it's orderly?
Not necessarily. But it does tweak a mind to think in some way that's different from assuming it's chaotic. You see, that's the interesting thing, is that he's actually created a world that we respond to just like we respond to the real world.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, that just shows that he was, that it's a rich creation.
That's right. And now, Jerry, you want to say something?
And it all relates, because I was just asking, why is the word thoroughly intentional in there? Who put that in, Calvin or Frank? Thoroughly intentional.
Frank did, because that would be his words exactly as dictated.
Right.
Which I think came about after the fact.
After what fact?
After the artwork was all
After
done.
he gave the artwork.
Right.
Then he says,
It was almost like what he noticed.
So was it intentional?
Yeah, well, yeah, it wasn't. I mean, you're the one who put snat in there.
That's right.
He didn't put that in there.
Right.
So he's commenting on his extension, Cal Schenkel, you know.
who's carrying on
The order. In other words, he's commenting on you, Cal. You did it. Yeah,
That's why Fillmore says he made me do this.
Right. And that's why Calvin's going to win the lawsuit against Gale.
And that's why
Cal's behind Frank.
And he eventually works for Frank's dad, so it all connects.
Right. So why did you do it then?
Why did I do what?
Put these reference points.
Well, I would have to say that I had this plan back in the beginning, and
And he works for Frank's dad.
Yeah, our theory is Frank's dad was running this whole
part of the creative process. You know, I mean, it's like
the universe. Cal works whether he knows it or not. The universe works whether.
right.
Ask him if he knew Frank's dad.
Did you ever meet Frank's father?
Yeah.
Do you think he was Uncle Meat? That was very revealing, the tone of his aha. Well, Cal, you gave a lot out. We got it on tape.
There was certainly must have been characteristics that went into. I mean, he was a scientist, right? I mean, he was doing experiments or participating in experiments or something.
And we developed this with Tommy Mars. That's why you got to hear the Tommy Mars confirms it, and Nige confirms it. Because we realized she was describing Frank's use of climate, harmonic climates. And I'd already stated the idea the father was the guy behind the scenes, and she was considering as we went on for, 5 hours? Many hours of conversation. But at one point I bring up the climate thing, and she says, yeah, definitely, that was a key point. As a musician of Frank's thing, was he always emphasizing the climate. And then I go, yeah, his father was a meteorologist. So...
Well, the thing is, I mean, Nige probably has insights that I don't in that sense because she was closer to Frank. And when I was working with Frank or around Frank, very rarely did I probe into his personal life.
Right.
You know, so I didn't really look, I mean, I didn't ask him about these things.
You were lucky Frank was not a homosexual, Calvin. But anyways, yeah, Calvin, you know, what's her name had a unique angle on it. What's her name?
Yeah, I think maybe...
I mean, you should hear her describe how Frank had sex, Calvin. Do you know about that stuff? We get graphic descriptions of Frank's sexual techniques.
Yeah? Is that in the book?
No, it's confidential. No, it's sort of off the record.
Oh, well, let's hear some of it.
No, because we're being taped.
No, we're being taped, Calvin.
All right, well, then we'll...
Okay, why did you go ha-ha when we said Frank's father?
Well, I just connected with what you said.
You,
I don't have any great insight, but it just seems... well, first of all, I'm sure that, you know, you could look at it in Freudian terms.
Yeah.
Father figure and having an effect on his art.
Well, it's almost
character, you know.
It's almost like Frank consciously acted out the Freudian thing as part of a joke and made his metaphors fit into his father so that he could look like he was a Freudian reflex of his father.
Perhaps.
Was Frank, just off the top, was Frank's mind complex enough to do that?
Yeah, but I don't think that that's necessarily the answer.
It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma, wrapped inside a puzzle, or whatever that guy says in JFK.
Yeah.
Did you see that movie, JFK?
No.
It's great, where Joe Pesci is David Ferry, and they as they get onto him, he's on the payphone, and he gets real pissed off that they start saying things that are going to get him in trouble, which he's holding back, and he starts banging on the payphone with the phone handle, with the earpiece, and he's saying, this is his defense. As they start to get closer and implicate him, he goes, "It's a mystery wrapped inside a riddle, inside an enigma."
Mm-hmm.
Now, that mysterious process is the act of creation.
Yep.
And that's what you experienced, and you experienced it with Frank. Now, are you withholding any information on how to explain the why of this relationship between you and Frank mirroring this?
What?
It's a mystery.
Holding any information? Of course I am.
You are? Oh, yes. Now, why are you withholding it?
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, but that's the fun of working with Frank's art, because you can find all these things that cause you to look at interesting puzzles that you follow and seem to be leading somewhere.
Yeah, but I think the mystery of it is the most exciting part of it. So that's one reason why I want to. In fact, the more I think about it, the less I want to reveal. Not to you, but I mean to the general public.
But as if this is being taped, then that implies the general public, right?
Yeah, but then don't forget we've
got editing privileges. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well then tell us. It's not going to go public.
Well, I'm not saying anything can't go public. I mean, I'm not saying I want to withhold secrets. I'm just saying that, and I think that you recognize it too.
Yeah.
That the mysteriousness of it is probably the most compelling part of it in many ways.
And that's what you mean by that unexplainable term, karma.
Well, that's something else, but...
No, but that's what
I think karma is very easily explained. I mean, karma is really a very simple...
Oh, yeah, but you can't say what the karma is between you and Frank.
No, but that's true with a lot of any complex relationship. How can you say how can you explain the complex web of where anything comes from, if you go back layers and layers and layers.
Okay, but now you're saying that the mystery fact is a cliche. That mystery we all recognize.
Yes.
So what is the mystery that's entrancing or archetypal or involving, if it's not a cliche? What is the mystery that is involving and fascinating?
What is?
Yeah, what mystery is the... In other words, we've got two mysteries.
The fact that it's a mystery... I mean, I'm just saying the mysteriousness of trying to understand the whole thing is more interesting than picking it apart.
And when you say interesting, that implies to me not cliche.
Why?
Well, you're right. It then goes...
Well, cliche is just simply a metaphor that is well used.
Okay, round things are boring, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say, is that a cliche?
It is in the Zappa world, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a cliche in its original statement.
Right.
Yeah. Now, explain mystery in relation to that, because we never finished that. What is it? Where's the grievance in there? Because are you like squares?
Back saying that it's boring.
Yeah. Do you like squares?
Well, I tried to explain it, but I don't know that I can. I mean, to me, I think my analysis of it, which is me analyzing something that I've said subconsciously.
Yeah.
Right. Is that I had this awareness, which I didn't really understand at the time, of this continuously repeating cycle of existence, repeating over and over again the same thing.
Now, is that the fact that the sun comes up every day, or is it another part of existence?
Well, I think when I mention it, it's in reference to a specific existence, a specific life, a specific event occurring over and over again.
Oh, what? You have an event? You perceive an event repeating in your life?
Well, no, I think that, of course, that would be boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And that doesn't happen.
Don't we all get stuck in cycles now and then,
All right.
That's the cliche of it.
That's the cliche part.
But on a medical, you know,
Yeah.
that's the,
That's right, the metaphysical level.
yeah, on the metaphysical level, I was referring to this experience that I had where I experienced my life repeating itself over and over again. And that's what I was referring to. That's what I think I was referring to. Perhaps.
Not an event. Did you mean reincarnating?
Actually repeating the exact same events again, over and over again.
In more than one lifetime or within a lifetime?
The actual lifetime itself again, in every respect.
You do mean other lifetimes.
Well, it wouldn't be another lifetime. It would be the same lifetime. So
Right.
the same lifetime, then it's the exact same. So it isn't happening. But the experience was a false one, in my view. It was a different way of looking at something that I saw the wrong way. It's very hard for me to explain.
In other words, the grievance, you later realize with your Buddhism that the grievance flipped into happiness or whatever the opposite of grievance is, right?
Well, I guess, but it's not. It's a different understanding, I think,
Of the round thing.
reality. But the point is, I'm trying to explain what I meant by the term when I said it, which was this. I can't explain it.
Okay.
But if you want to consider it a grievance, it was disturbing to me, and it was something that, it really isn't boring, because boring is the wrong word,
So it was a profound statement said erroneously.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it.
Which is always the case.
Is it?
I don't think anybody's ever wrapped up the whole issue with a statement. Einstein said E equals mc squared and caused a few bombs as a result of that, right?
Right, true.
And he probably didn't intend that because he was quite pissed off that happened.
Yeah.
So nobody has successfully stopped the world, as Dylan said, no death has stopped the world.
Right.
But looking at Uncle Meat in the little booklet, there's the little, the Time magazine thing, the little electronic, after the Armageddon, in the Captain Beefheart versus the Grunt 1969 movie, it ends after the Armageddon. They find, whoever they is, the survivors, see that the concentration camp in the Grand Canyon is run by an electric doll in the glove compartment of the Volkswagen bus disguised as Chicken Delight truck.
Uh-huh.
Okay? You have the little doll on the cover of the booklet. The Uncle Meat car and the little guy in the front piece on the hood going, the jelly.
Right.
Now, did Frank tell you to put that there?
I'm sure he probably did.
But the Uncle Meat booklet was done by you.
Yeah, so?
Okay, I see. So
Following instructions. He made me do it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's turning into cyborg. Yes, I did this. I will do that.
You get mixed up, Bob, because you say, did you do this? And Cal goes, yes. It doesn't mean he conceived it. That's
okay. We'll redo the...
Okay, well, when you say, did I do it, do you mean...
I draw it.
Yeah.
You drew it.
Conceive it or draw it, you should ask.
But
you have to ask me specifically what you're asking.
Well, why? Okay, but in the interview in Seconds, I think you say the Uncle Meat was more your collage. But you're talking about the Elvin cover. The cover.
The cover with the dental, the teeth, the skull.
The cover.
Right, now that's important. The booklet.
The book was different. The book, I probably should have been more specific in the interview. Or maybe if I ever reprint it, I'll mention. Yeah,
the booklet is Frank organized.
The booklet was definitely very much Frank's organization, yes.
What do you know why who this character is? He referring to the murder of Lenny Bruce? If he was murdered, I've just been killed by the government because I knew too much. Did Frank ever talk about that paranoid scenario to you?
Well, that's isn't it a giant egg planter?
Yeah. Okay, there's the image in the booklet. But is he referring to something he knew in his journalistic sense that was going on in Los Angeles, or?
I don't know if he's referring to a specific incident, as you mentioned, Bruce, or if he's just using it as a metaphor for the time, because of his whole concentration camp idea and, the hippies
Well, that was actually the words, it came out later. Ronald Reagan had the garden plot, and they were going to round up people.
Right.
This is in Pynchon's book, The Vineland.
Right.
Have you read that?
No.
No, but he develops that whole scenario of late 60s and writes it out as a novel. But did Frank ever discuss those real-world concerns to you?
He mentioned them, but I wouldn't say discussed them.
He just told you.
Yes, and I wouldn't say he sat me down and told me, but the point is that they came up at some point, and possibly maybe in a setting that was not just me and Frank, but maybe there were other people there talking about it, But it's...
And that would be in New York at Charles.
Yeah, and then in L.A. too.
In 68, right. Because the booklet, all of Uncle Meat was not finished in New York. The album...
Right.
Yeah, it was also in the log cabin.
Well, the artwork was all done in L.A.
Oh, okay. So Frank says that it took him 3 weeks to write the booklet story of Uncle Meat. Do you know anything about that? Why it took so long, or what he meant by? He said, "I don't write that much because it takes too long."
Where did he say that?
In an interview at the time. I remember it. It's a long time ago. I just always noted that he said that. It took him a long time to write the booklet story.
Don't remember.
Don't remember that?
No.
Now, did Don, when you met Frank in New York, did he talk about Beefheart in '67 to you?
Uh-huh.
Why would he talk about him, since Don has one album out, Safe as Milk, maybe, and Strictly Personal?
Well, I knew they were friends, so we must have talked about him.
Maybe because an album of his showed up in your presence, and Frank goes, "I know him," kind of thing.
Maybe. I was listening to Captain Beefheart at the time.
Oh, okay.
Because I had been in L.A. They had a single, which I really dug, was released while I was in L.A. Diddy Wah Diddy.
Yeah.
And I really dug that, so I think that's the reason that I got their album.
Would that be your first visit to L.A. or the second one?
Maybe the second.
Yeah, after San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 67. No, 66. That's 66. So
that would be, 66.
So that when you did have a chance to interact with Frank, then of course the Beefheart would come up, because you were into Beefheart a bit.
Yeah.
Right. So did he ever talk about what he thought? Did he ever analyze Beefheart or express what he, sort of judge or describe?
I was surprised to learn that they went to school together.
That was a revelation, right? That was synchronicity hitting you in the face, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the mystery again.
Yeah.
So did he discuss that with you? That period of his life with Beefheart? Did you ever go into it with him?
Well, again, we didn't sit down and have discussions about his past life, but it came up at various times for various reasons. I remember looking at old home movies at some point and talking and hearing stories. And again, probably not just me and Frank, but I remember before, when we still lived on Thompson Street, I remember one night when Dick Barber was there, we were looking at all these old home movies.
And Beefheart was in them.
Yeah, I was hearing stories about all the different people.
Yeah, which show up in G-Spot Tornado, right, Jerry?
Video.
The video for G-Spot.
Oh, really? I've never seen that.
Yeah, the merry-go-round footage. The LA.
Where is that?
Where is that, Jerry? Can you get that video?
I mean, is that on one of the videos, or what is that?
It's a one-song video that's, I think it's on the end of Uncle Meat or on the end of True Story of 200 Motels.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
And you see the young Beefheart and his girlfriend walking around. You see actual footage of them in Beefheart's house, maybe.
I gotta go find that.
No, you see Captain Beefheart's mother and his grandmother and Don, and then
it is on one of those videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you might even see a picture of the uncle that used to flash Don's sister and was called Beefheart. the Beefheart name came out of that.
Oh, really?
Oh, you know where the name came from?
No, what's the story?
Jerry,
There's 3 possible discussions.
give him the 3 views.
That Don, the unlikely one is that Don had a beef in his heart. Then there's one that something about a Beefheart tomato, and then you tell the third one.
And the third one is, you correct me, is his uncle.
Yeah.
Would flash his sister?
Yeah.
All right. the uncle would stay at the house, right?
Yeah.
The uncle, Don's uncle, would come to the house and stay with Don and his sister and parents. After a while, it became known to the family that the uncle would flash his dick to Don's sister, sometimes in the house.
Let me read it from the Old Master's booklet. His name derives from one of Don Vliet's relatives who looked like Harry Truman. He used to piss with the door open when Don's girlfriend walked by and make comments about how his Weezer looked just like a Beefheart.
So it's not Don's sister, it's Don's girlfriend.
Yeah, I was wondering, I didn't think Don had a sister. Wasn't he an only child?
No, it's Don's girlfriend.
Yeah,
he's an only child.
Yeah, I was saying sister, but you just said there it says girlfriend.
Yeah.
Which was named Lori? Was that Lori? Anyways, so Beefheart, here you have Captain Beefheart versus the Grunt people.
Yep.
And in this interview with Wally, what's really interesting, August 71, when Frank was asked by the cop to make the audio porno tape for the, well, it was a cop undercover as a salesman. So they're going to have a stag party, make the porno audio tape. The guy wanted no laughter. No, it had to be serious grunts. Not, no laughing on it. You know what I mean? So Frank says he made a 22-minute film, audio tape with he and the girlfriend, friend, Louise Belcher, bouncing up and down the springs, making grunts, but laughing while they were doing it. And he had to edit out the laughter parts, the giggles, and it became a 10-minute serious grunt thing. That was the term they used. He said, "This got to be serious grunts, no laughing grunts," right?
Mm-hmm.
So think of it: Captain Beefheart versus the Grunt people.
Yep.
Most people take grunt as a military thing, somebody drafted or something, right? That's in the military world, grunts.
Right.
Soldiers called grunts. That's how I first took it.
Ah.
But now we're seeing that it's grunt, that Captain Beefheart versus the Grunt people. The Grunt people can be the guys who want serious grunt porno, right?
Uh-huh.
Or if you think of Beefheart as a flasher, then he's the porno guy. So it's interchangeable, the meaning of grunt as serious grunt as in relation to a porno thing, if you know that Beefheart comes from a porno situation of a flasher.
Yes. Sure.
So you didn't know that. That's new in terms of interpreting that for you, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so Captain Beefheart is the flasher versus the grunt people, which could be, Beefheart is a weird person. Think of the training film for the Cucamonga police. You got this pervert, Mr. Beefheart, versus the grunt people. In this case, the grunt people are the cops, because they want serious grunts.
Right.
Which would become, ostensibly at the beginning, before...
Why aren't the grunt people the people making the grunts?
Yeah, that could be that way. You see, it's interchangeable. If you know that Beefheart refers to a pervert flasher, then you can see that he's the pervert. But if you interpret the grunt people as the people making the grunts, then they're perverts, right? Because they're the perverts making the grunt sounds that you're taping.
I think the perverts are the ones who are hiring to buy the grunts.
All right. Then Captain Beefheart in that case would be Detective Willis. The undercover guy who's setting up the grunt people.
Why would that be Captain Beefheart?
Oh, in the phrase Captain Beefheart versus grunt people, then the grunt people are not the perverts. The perverts.
What's the difference? What is this all getting at? Actually, because I always thought that was just a name, and that it was used, that it was basically going to be a science fiction movie.
Right, about a guy going to the moon.
Yeah.
All right, but the thing is that why is he Okay, Frank on this official Old Masters album is defining the name Beefheart.
But it's really too bad that once Frank got some money, he didn't make that movie, because that would have been the one to make.
Yeah, and that goes way back to '62 when he designed Studio Z as a spaceship, And that one. But let's say that he did make it, because you got songs like Portuguese Moon Landing, you've got Concentration Moon, the whole.
I'm saying make the movie itself.
Right, but the movie is all his music is a movie for your ears.
Yes, but I'm talking about actually making a movie.
Yeah, he could, maybe, yeah.
That would have been the great movie to make on a low budget.
Yeah.
It was supposed to look that way, whereas
And that's maybe why here he is in Time magazine. Frank is always using the media to get prospective investors. All right, he knows to take the opportunity. So he doesn't use the title Uncle Meat, which was the actual movie he's talking about in '69. To Time magazine, he says the old movie, Captain Beefheart versus the Grunt People.
Yep.
So he was maybe still. You're right. He was trying to get that one off the ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yet the content. When he describes the content in Time magazine, he's describing the Uncle Meat movie, because you got the little electric doll that you drew under Frank's instructions on the Chevy.
Uh-huh.
And the hippies are running around like in a valley, like it's a concentration camp, and they're running from the car that's attacking the Vatican. You see what I'm saying? And that fits because this booklet was designed by Frank.
Yeah.
So he's following the movie script here, which he labels in Time magazine Captain Beefheart versus the Grunt People.
Right.
But I'm just showing you the flux of which is the grunt and which is the pervert in that title when you know the whole story.
Right.
Of both the meaning of Beefheart's name and the meaning of Grunt People, where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
All right, so what do you think Don was referring to when he said something's fast and bulbous and something else is, what's the other one? Fast and bulbous and...
Jelly.
Tight and tapered. Tight and tapered.
Where's tight and tapered?
That's actually on the Beefheart album, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. In other words, we get fast and bulbous in the booklet, but on Trout Replica, you find out there's a complimentary phrase, tight and tapered, said by Beefheart himself.
Well, I don't want to interpret other people's phrases.
But you never heard anybody explain it or elaborate on it.
No. I was just, I mean, to me it just said sexual innuendo, you know?
Right. Now, maybe it's already on the record what the jelly is, but what do you think the jelly is?
The jelly?
Yeah. No, did Frank tell you?
No.
Did Frank tell you?
No, but I would say that I would simply be, jism.
Oh, okay. And why would the famous American presidents be in the jelly?
Well, because it had taken on a life of its own.
The presidency?
Right. The jelly did.
Well, how does the presidents indicate a life of its own? It's an institution?
No, it's not the presidents. It's the heads on Mount Rushmore.
Right, but they refer to the great men in American history.
No, but they also are simply something carved out of a rock.
There you get your sculpture reality,
right.
Your sculpture theme.
Yeah.
And that is...
It would also be like, something that you would cast like a Jell-O mold,
Right, yeah.
Quivering.
Well, at the time, I had read some interviews with him in '68, and he was thinking of running Tom, the guy who discovered him, the famous producer.
Yeah.
Do you remember his name? What's his name, Jerry? Tom who? The black guy. Who discovered Frank?
Tom Wilson.
Tom Wilson. Okay, he was running, Frank was talking about running Tom Wilson for president in '68.
Yeah.
Do you have any conversations on that?
No, I remember hearing it, but then he was also talking about running himself.
Right, and that's why when I fortunately read the interview around that time, then when I saw this booklet, I immediately saw the running for president theme as an interpretation of these presidential figures in the jelly.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And then Frank, he then did run for president, almost, at the end of his life.
Yeah.
But see, then that comes back, we come full circle back to Pamela Zarubica. Pamela Zarubica fucking thought Frank should run for president. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? That a young woman could be so inspired by Frank and be so naive that she thought Frank should do that and gets angry at him when he doesn't.
Well, he came to me.
Uh-oh, here comes the secret information.
In the log cabin.
Yeah.
And said that he was going to run for president.
In '68?
Yep.
Now this 2 hours, well, we've been 3 hours, Jerry. That is a key statement because...
Now, he didn't tell me he was going to run in '68, but I mean, that's when I first heard him say that he wanted to run for president.
Oh, that's
he was thinking of running for president, or at some point he might want to run for president, or however he put it.
Oh, that's an amazing fact, Calvin, because look at this.
Code, Bob.
What?
You broke code.
We broke code. We cracked the case here.
I rest my case.
Calvin's been here. We're police. We're the brain police. We've had Calvin under the spotlight for 3 fucking hours. Yes, Frank did kill Kennedy. And it was under instructions of his father, who worked for military intelligence. Anyways, this is neat because we know that Frank, he has said that to you personally, but any public statements on that theme from 68 on, he's talking about other people running for president.
Yeah.
Which is that artistic...
This time was not right.
Yes, but it was the artistic self-consciousness of Frank to have other people doing it. And this is the conceptual continuity. He knows, let's say he knows he's going to try to do it somehow, someday, all right?
Yeah.
So he is commenting on what he's going to do in his own life, metaphorically through art pieces, like in 68 saying we're going to get Tom Wilson in this silly idea of him running on the Uncle Meat agenda in the Uncle Meat movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's talking by a code about his own plans in using the immediate people around him to be a metaphor of the theater of it.
Sure.
Now, did you know that about Frank?
What?
Did you? What? Did you see that what I just said you agree with? Did you see Frank doing that? You knew he was incorporating everybody's theater as a general principle. Okay, we understand that, right?
Yeah.
We knew he was incorporating whatever, anything.
I was not the analytical person at the time.
Yeah, you were not.
No.
Okay, so you weren't totally aware that he was using everybody's theater at that point.
Oh, I was, but I wasn't analyzing it that way. I mean, I certainly could see when he very specifically did, I could see it, sure.
Right. Did you analyze it later in your life?
No, because it didn't matter that much to me.
It's only now. We're evoking this analysis now, or...
Well, he's not saying it matters now either.
Right.
Not that it matters, but we're analyzing it. So...
And the point is, I didn't really think that it was much more than just, okay, well, Frank has people doing his artwork, and that's, so
right.
He's using people doing his artwork. But I didn't think of it as some sort of sinister plot to control other people.
No, not saying it's a sinister plot, but the point is, when he told you that, what was your personal reaction in your state of your mind that you were then to this ambition? What did you think of that when he said that to you?
What a silly idea. He could never become the president.
And yet Pamela Zarubica...
How impractical of him,
Very good, Bob. Good persistence.
Good persistence, Jerry says. You're happy that we got Calvin to say that?
Yeah, but you better consider you got to eat very soon.
No, that's no problem. We're not going to... We're okay, the funny thing is that Pamela Zarubica did not think it was naive. Now, it's...
I don't know. I mean, when she said that, I don't know that she was necessarily serious.
No, that was the encounter in her manuscript that pissed her off about Frank. She got pissed off. And she wrote about how disappointed she was that night that Frank was withdrawing from his purpose. Now here's the interesting thing. That's October 67. We're talking in a year later, Frank is still projecting his ambition on you, and you're seeing it as silly, but the year before, Pamela was already subject to that ambition and pissed off that Frank copped out on it.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? That, you see how... It's almost like Frank was playing a mind game with people to say he was going to run for president to see what effects it had on you or Pamela. Do you know what I mean?
Well, maybe, except he wouldn't have seen what effect it had on me because I'm sure I didn't show any effect that it had on me.
Yeah, you kept...
I probably would have just said, oh, that's nice.
That's right. Oh, just a second.